very much. All right, thank you. I'm going to situate this so everybody can see the screen, and hopefully this will work. So pardon me while I get this set up. All right. So I don't want to be bound by that too much. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first time at UnityCR. As she said, I grew up in Cedar Rapids, actually at Grace Baptist Church on Highway 100. Some of you may be familiar with that. Actually, there my whole life. So today I'm going to talk to you about probably a subject maybe some of you are not aware of or understand, and that is humanism, secular humanism, because I run across a lot of people that when presented with that term, there's confusion or they don't understand, or it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So hopefully, at the end of my talk here, you'll have a better understanding of what it means to be a secular humanist, a humanist. And so before I do that, though, I want to kind of talk about my journey. What led me to secular humanism? Why am I at the point where I'm at? So I was born into a born-again household. So my parents were both born-again Christians, and that was how I was raised. Right? I was in a Christian school my entire life, and that was my world. Right? Growing up, I had the privilege of knowing that me and my group of people were going to go to heaven when we died, right? And unfortunately for the rest of humanity, their fate was going to be quite different, right? And so that's kind of the world in which I grew up. I mean, it was just this feeling of, wow, how special am I? I mean, it's an amazing feeling. And of course, as I got older and you understand the world a little bit more, things begin to change a little bit, right? Your mind begins to open up a bit. So I graduated from high school in 1998 and went off to Bible college at Providence Baptist College, where I was to pursue one's highest calling in life, and that is to become a pastor, right, a full-time Christian worker. And for me, that was the greatest thing I could ever do, to both please my parents and my friends and my community that I valued very, very, very much, right? It was my world. And of course, you know, God was who I was ultimately trying to please. And so I went to Bible college, and I crammed 4 years of school into 5, and was able to graduate. And during that time, you know, some small questions began to arise in my mind, but these were questions, of course, that I had to kind of suppress and understand that these were not to be thought about for a variety of reasons. So I ended up graduating, and I went to First Baptist Church in Plattsmouth, Nebraska, where I served as the associate pastor for 5 years. And so I did everything from driving buses to fixing toilets to being the worship leader to teaching youth Sunday school classes, adult Sunday school classes, you know, preaching, singing, you name it, I did it, right? And that's part of the excitement of being in a smaller church and having the ability to do a little bit of everything, right? It was a small town, 7,500 people, and you got to know a lot of people, and I had a great, wonderful, wonderful experience there, and I don't regret 1 second of it. But during that time, more questions began to arise in my mind, and part of it had to do, I think, with me having children for the first time. I had 4 wonderful children, and there became a point where now it was, I have to impart on them these particular beliefs that I have. Now, to give you some context, it was an independent fundamental Baptist church. It's a pretty strict religious community. To give you an idea, when I was in college, we would have unannounced raids, right, on our dorm room, on our cars, to see if we had unapproved music. And this was any music that had any kind of beat in it, right? Any kind of beat which was inspired by Satan. But that was and we had a whole class we had to take as part of pursuing our degree at Providence called Appropriate Music. And that was what type of music does God honor versus what type of music is inspired by Satan. And so you had to, at the end of this course, be able to identify different music as they were presented to you, whether this was satanically inspired music versus, Christian music. And any music that had any type of beat in it, this was, the rationale was Satan is the author of confusion. Some of you may be familiar with that passage from Scripture. And therefore, when these different types of beats, versus the 1, 2, 3, 4, were presented, this was Satan trying to confuse the music and therefore confuse our mind and hearts. And that was to be, shunned. And so oftentimes, I would sneak Southern gospel music or some contemporary Christian music, and if you were caught with it, you were fined, and if you were caught with it enough times, you could potentially be expelled from school. I did get caught going to movie theaters, and unfortunately, that was a $50 fine per movie, but unfortunately, I was able to stay in school. Anyways, I got a lot of this craziness out of me in my first couple years, right? So I remember I got rid of all my Southern gospel music, I got rid of my contemporary Christian music, and unfortunately, some rock music. But I asked God to forgive me, and I, asked my parents to forgive me. I had to get on a phone call with them and, explain to them what I'd done. I'd gone to see a movie, wanted to see Bug's Life, and but this was, and some of you this could be very familiar with, right? Or you may be very familiar with this type of community. And for them, this was the context in which you lived your life, and this gave you value, this gave you meaning, and it made sense, right? You wanted to maintain a close relationship with God, and in order to do that, you had to make sure your life was as pure and holy and untainted from the world. And so this was some of the rationale that was used. So anyways, I went to the church. After a few years, different doubts began to arise. I remember particularly listening to a debate between a theist and an atheist. One of the very first times I've ever been exposed to the idea of God not existing, right? Which was I had heard of atheists growing up, but they were always these evil kind of treacherous beings that had at their core the desire to destroy religion and destroy God, destroy society, and the entire universe, right? These were the novels that I would read, would always kind of paint the atheists as these evil creatures that were possessed by Satan, for lack of a better term. So anyways, I really didn't have an idea. I never met an atheist that I could remember, or certainly somebody that never admitted to that fact. But then I watched an episode, or basically a debate, and I remember thinking at the end, well, certainly this is going to be just the Christian, or the theist in this case, just trouncing the atheist. But I was puzzled at the end because I was thinking to myself, well, a lot of what that atheist said kind of made sense. But again, the guilt of even thinking of that kind of was too much. And so I kind of pushed that down. But things began to happen, and for a lot of it, it was not so much questioning the existence of God for me, but it was questioning the different things within the church that we believed. We believed that the King James Bible was the only Bible that could be read. Any other version, again, inspired by Satan, but that made sense. Well, of course, there's only one Bible. Any other Bible would have to be some copycat version, which, of course, that's probably Satan that's involved with that. And so we never read anything. So these things I began to question these things. And I remember I went to our pastor, and this would have been the January of 2008. Our senior pastor didn't share any of these concerns with anybody else in the church. I was associate pastor, high profile. I wasn't going around talking to anybody saying, hey, what do you think about this, that, or that, or the other? No, it was pretty much internalized, right? But there was that cognitive dissonance that was something I had to kind of deal with, right? And it was kind of boiling up inside, and it was like, I've got to resolve this somehow. And so I remember knocking on the door, taking the first kind of leap of faith to say, you know what, it probably would be good just to talk to somebody about this. I need to be authentic. I need to be real, especially if I'm now in a position of being a leader in the church, right? I mean, people are relying on me for direction, for guidance. I had just baptized a few kids, and the parents asked me, well, what would happen if they were killed before they were baptized? Do they go to heaven? Do they go to hell? I didn't have any good answers for that. I searched the internet. The internet didn't have very good answers for me. And I'm like, if the internet doesn't have very good answers for me, then we're all basically in trouble here, right? And this was the 2008 internet, so maybe the 2017 internet does have the answers, but anyways, at the time, it didn't. And so that was another thing. I was, oh. So I knocked on the door, and I remember standing there looking. I said, you know what, if I knock on this door and I go through with this, and, I'm like shaken to death. I'm on the point of a nervous breakdown. So I'm like, if I knock on this door, my life is going to go one way versus the other, because I was now in the position of possibly candidating for a bigger church, or a church of my own, I should say. That was kind of on the horizon, right? So I was like, okay, what do I do here now? I'm really going to step out there. So I better make sure this is what I want to do. Well, I knocked on the door and I said, listen, I think I need to go a different direction. Maybe I need to step out of the ministry, kind of sort things out. And he was very, 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 very gracious about it. He said, well, give me a list of things we need to talk about. Well, I did that. Long story short, it was more than he anticipated and more than he had answers for. And I'm like, well, do you have any answers for me on this? And he's like, yeah, this is just kind of the thing we do. And, I'm not going to be able to explain all this to you. And, of course, I didn't expect an answer. I mean, these were questions that people had wrestled with for thousands of years. Anyways, the point is, I moved back to Cedar Rapids, and I went to a local church here in town that was more of a conservative type church, not as fundamentalist, right, but conservative. And it was a scary time for me, because I went into a church for the first time in which ladies wore pants. And that was not a world in which I was familiar with and very comfortable with at all, right? I was taught that women do not wear pants. This is an abomination, right? That was the world. I was 28 years old, and up until that point, that's the world I knew. And I remember walking into this particular church, handing my 2-year-old daughter off to this woman in the nursery that was wearing a pair of pants. And I was like, oh, I can remember feeling like, okay, I'm handing this over to who? I mean, somebody that's like, Satan is controlling their life. She's confused. What is she going to do to my child? And of course, it's looking back at it, it seems bizarre, right? And even if I'm talking to you now, it seems a bit bizarre, doesn't it? But in that world, it's not bizarre. It makes perfect sense. But I remember going to church for a while and trying to work these things out, and I began to explore more and more and more about the idea of what it means to, believe these certain things, what it means to believe in general, what does it mean, what is God, why is there suffering in the world? A lot of these questions that people, even as Christians or theists or whatever you're, as a religious person, you think about on occasion, right? And I began to explore these things more and more and more and more, and suffice it to say, everything began to unravel for me, and to the point at which I began to question, does God exist? And I came to the point in my life where I said, I'm not convinced. That's it. I'm not convinced that a God exists. And that's really as simple as it is, right? And that's now how I identify as an atheist. Do I know God does not exist? No, I don't know that. I don't think anybody knows that. But I'm not convinced that he, she, or it does. And that's really what atheism is. It doesn't say much beyond that. It doesn't say anything beyond that, to be honest with you. It doesn't tell you how you then should live. It doesn't tell you how what you should believe about anything else in the world. It just simply states the fact that I'm not convinced that God exists. Some people conflate the idea that, well, because you're an atheist, therefore you have no moral compass, you have no way to live your life, you have no purpose, you have no meaning, you have none of that stuff. No, atheism doesn't address any of that. Atheism simply says, I'm not convinced that a God exists. So that's a little bit of my story, and we're going to take just a few more minutes now. I'm going to take a few more minutes and just kind of give you an idea of what it means to be a humanist. What is secular humanism? And really, like Christianity, like some of the other things, it can mean different things to different people. But generally speaking, humanism is simply a way of viewing the world, right? A context in which to live your life by. It's not predicated on particular beliefs or having to believe in something that's unfounded or there's no empirical evidence for. None of that. It's just a context in which to live your life. And so a lot of atheists, agnostics, free thinkers are attracted to humanism and secular humanism because it does offer the ability to say, okay, I want to live my life in this certain way. I want to value these things in my life. And without having to believe in a God, in supernatural, in things that require what is traditionally known as faith or belief. All right? So that is that, and I took too much time in my intro. Now I have to. Okay, so I talked a little bit about my journey so far. So what is humanism? Now, to clarify, humanism is synonymous really with secular humanism. Any word? Again, this morning I was reading a news article, and they clarified that point. When you see capital H humanism, it is typically synonymous with secular humanism. So when I use these terms, they are interchangeable. So what is humanism? Humanism is a comprehensive, non-religious life stance espousing no belief in the supernatural, a positive ethical outlook, the principle of individualism, that we have the power as an individual to think for ourselves and come to conclusions, define our own life, and the practice of critical thinking. The practice of critical thinking. All right? Humanism incorporates a naturalistic philosophy, a cosmic outlook rooted in science, and a consequentialist ethical system. We'll talk just a little bit about that. So what is a naturalistic philosophy? What does it mean? What does that even mean? Okay? And sometimes people will make the claim that, well, as a secular humanist or as an atheist, you know that the supernatural does not exist, or you reject that entirely. There's actually a point of clarification there. Actually, there's different types of naturalism, which I won't go into. Excuse me. But what it basically does is it says this. When we say supernatural does not exist, okay, what we're saying is there's been no way of observing the supernatural so far, right? We've never come up a way in which we can study or understand or observe or any of these things when it comes to when it comes to the supernatural world. Therefore, we have to live our lives in such a way in which we assume the supernatural does not exist. But until that point, now if it comes up that we find out the supernatural exists in some way, right, we're able to define it, observe it in any way, shape, or form, then we might have to revise our stance on it. But the naturalistic philosophy, so that's kind of the underlying assumption. So again, the whole point of my talk here today is to hopefully help you better understand so that if you do have a friend or somebody that you is an atheist or humanist, you're going to have a better idea of where are they coming from. So, supernatural does not exist. Nature is all there is. Again, these are not dogmatic statements that we 100% know beyond a doubt that they don't exist. They're simply saying the evidence so far points to the fact that nature is all there is. Similar to Bigfoots don't exist. Do we know that? Emphatically? Absolutely? No, but there's not been any really good evidence presented so far that they do. We utilize the scientific method, right? It's not a science class, so I won't go into that. Knowledge comes from the natural world. So when we think of something that we know, typically it corresponds to something that we've observed in our world, right? Different from a belief, or I think, or I have faith in this. Knowledge typically stems from observed things that have happened. So this is kind of what underlies a humanist type of thinking when they look at the world. Then there's what we call the kind of the cosmic outlook. How did we arrive here? So this is humanism kind of answering the bigger questions of life, the ones that we strive to know about, right? The things that are fundamental to us as human beings. We've developed a very evolved consciousness, right, to where we can understand ourselves as individuals, understand ourselves in the bigger context of the world. And because of that, we start to think about, where did I come from? Where am I going? Right? This is one of the basic questions that traditional religions try to address.
So we understand that the evidence so far says that we arose through natural evolution, right? Does biological evolution tell us how organic life arose in the first place? No, it does not. That's science, and we have not been able to understand that as of yet. But we do, through the help of Charles Darwin, have now understand pretty good that there is how biological life arose. And there's tons of evidence that support that over the last 150 plus years. And so that's kind of how we understand the world, is that it has arose through very natural processes. Evolution, as you can imagine, was called evolution growing up, and that was, of course, another scientific discovery that was inspired by Satan. Now, interestingly enough, we didn't reject 99.9% of all other scientific discoveries, but evolution kind of struck a nerve because it seems to contradict what's in Scripture, right? But as you know, and some of you may be fine with evolution in here, some of you may not, and that's the part of this talk here, right, is to expose you to different ideas and different points of view. But I think what we understand, though, is that evolution does kind of contrast with what Scripture teaches, especially in the Genesis account. However, many religions have learned how to kind of make those two worldviews kind of work, right? And I think that's a wonderful thing. I think that religion, especially in the United States, will continue to thrive because of that ability to kind of adapt to different evidence and I think that's one of the reasons the Bible thrives as much as it does, because it does have this ability to kind of adapt to different worldviews. So we are as undesigned, unintended beings. Okay, so cards on the table, there is no grand purpose for me being here. And to put it bluntly, there's no grand purpose for you being here from a humanistic perspective, right? Now, we want to assign purpose, we want to assign meaning to our life, which I think is fundamental to thriving as a human being. So humanists certainly recognize that although there isn't a grand purpose that is kind of placed over your life and said, this is your purpose, now go and fulfill it, rather, kind of on that idea of individualism, this idea that no, you have the ability, the freedom, the power to establish your own purpose, your own meaning in life, whatever that may be. It may be refurbishing old vehicles. That brings you it may be hiking. It may be art. It may be music. And that, by the way, was amazing. Are you living like a voice or something? I'm like, geez, that is fantastic. Wow, that was phenomenal. Really, really was. In fact, I was thinking, I should just sit down and we could listen to her the whole time. Far better, far better. Anyway, so how am I doing on time? I don't want to lose track. What I got? We still all good? We're good? We're good? Okay. I don't want to. So again, we can assign our own purpose, our own belief, right? Our own meaning in life. And that can be very scary for some people, right? Like some people, just the way we're kind of wired, we like to be told what our purpose and our meaning is. That provides us comfort, right? And so that draws us to community. That draws us to having that sense of community, that sense of belonging, that sense of purpose and meaning that then provides. Again, humanists recognize that because we're human beings, and that is a natural desire for all of us. So we explore and we celebrate the different meanings and the different purposes that people assign to the life. Now, don't confuse that with, is it moral, is it right? So somebody can have meaning or a purpose in life. A serial killer can say, my purpose in life is to kill as many people as I can. All right, well, yes, but is that moral? Is that ethically right? No, right? And that gets into what we'll talk about next, which is, how does a humanist then, without a God, right? How do you define what is right and wrong? I mean, obviously, if there's no God, then anything goes, right? It's kind of like if once the parents leave the house, the kids can do whatever they want, right? Mom and dad's gone, I'm going to trash the house. I'm going to light a fire in the fireplace. I'm going to, whatever the case, I'm just going to do whatever I want.
And that's kind of, and maybe you've been familiar with that, that's kind of the thinking that people have when it comes to somebody that is an atheist or agnostic or somebody that doesn't have a God in their life or a book to necessarily tell them what to do. Now, I will admit that it is similar to purpose and meaning. It is sometimes more appealing to people to have a group, organization, or person tell them what is right and what is wrong, right? So for me, it was wrong for a woman to wear pants. That was evil. That was a sin. That was wrong. And so I lived my life by that. And when I saw someone wearing pants, it made me very uncomfortable. And when my family began to kind of then move away from that and start wearing pants, the women in my family, there was this sense that this is wrong, this is evil, this is sinful. And I was told that is the Holy Spirit pricking you, telling you that you know what you're doing is wrong. Now, I think most of us can see right away that isn't a result probably of the Holy Spirit. It's rather a result of the conditioning that I was raised with, right? I was told many times that it was an abomination for women to wear pants, okay? But that was the reason. Once I was able to get away from that and understand that, no, there's a better way to define what is right and wrong, and that is namely, what are the consequences of my behavior? I began to see that, no, it's probably not sinful, it's probably not wrong. And so when I listen to rock music today, I was last night at the Campbell Steel Art Gallery, a little plug for them. Little Ed and the Imperials were there, and a blues band, and they were phenomenal, amazing, all right? But just a few short years ago, I would have been under the conviction of the Holy Spirit for being involved in such a sinful environment and a sinful activity. Today, though, I celebrate this amazing talent, this amazing experience with amazing people, and it made my life amazing, right? So there's like this completely opposite feeling that I got from it, and that's puzzling. It's interesting. It's like, why is that? So this is how a secular humanist approaches life when it comes to right and wrong. And I'll just say it right away. Defining what is right and wrong is by far the most difficult thing you will probably ever try to do in your entire life. So humanists, just like every other human being on earth, do not have the market on what is right or wrong. Okay? In fact, what we say right away is right and wrong not defined in advance, right? So we're not going to say, well, this is right and this is wrong, and therefore that's it, right? We're done. No question, no discussions. No, rather we look at the actions that we do to see, okay, what is the result of our actions? And we as a group, as a society, have to constantly continue to evaluate the consequences of our actions. And it may be that the consequences of our actions aren't necessarily right away noticeable. And we may have to go back and say, whoa, we didn't realize the consequences of this. Let's say a particular drug that we allowed to be marketed to people, and then we realized horrible side effects, very addictive, tobacco being a great example. As a society, we had to move and say, you know what? It's probably wrong, it's probably evil, it's probably sinful to market tobacco to young people, to people, without just showing them or explaining to them the consequences of that, namely how, raising your risk of cancer. Okay, so that's kind of a great example of not just saying something is right or wrong and then just that's it for eternity, right? It's being willing and open to saying, okay, we may need to rethink our position on this, all right? And then again, as I mentioned, we develop and improve ethical principles. We're never going to arrive, right? There's never going to be a day in which we're like, we have everything figured out. No. The world is changing rapidly. I mean, think about all the privacy issues when it comes to the internet, and just the ethical considerations when it comes to artificial intelligence that is just starting to rapidly take over our lives, unbeknownst to many of us, right? What are some of the ethical considerations there as we have the ability to manipulate biology at a cellular level and possibly, these are fascinating things that just a few years ago we never thought we'd even be wrestling with, but now we
have to. And unfortunately, there's no right or wrong sometimes to these answers. We have to continue to look at the consequences and evolve our ethical principles. All right, so I'm going to move along here very quickly. So how do humanists view life? I've already touched a little bit on this. Well, this is our only life. As far as we know, back to what I said earlier, there's no good evidence of an afterlife. Now, most of us, when we hear that, we think, that sucks, right? Including myself, right? Because I always look forward to the idea that when you die, the real world opens up and you get to spend eternity partying with your friends in whatever heaven may be for you. And heaven is different for a lot of different people. But for again, a humanist, it's all about trying to believe as many true things and not believe as many false things as possible, regardless of how it may or may not make you feel, right? And when it comes to the afterlife, this is one of those in which we have to honestly say there doesn't seem to be any good evidence that once your brain stops functioning completely, that is the end of things, right? And that's probably one of the biggest pills to swallow. And for a lot of people, they choose not to swallow that pill, and that's entirely up to you. But it does then push a humanist to say, you know what? We have to make this life as good as possible for as many people as possible. There's some other stuff I wanted to possibly talk about this that is actually even more fascinating, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. Maybe I'll do that in a part 2 at a later time. But I will say that technology has opened a crack potentially in the window of could there be an afterlife, or at least extending life. I mean, technology has done more for us as far as extending life, certainly, hasn't it? I mean, over the last 200 years, life expectancies have almost doubled. And the potential of what technology could do for us is pretty wild. But that's all I'm going to say on that. So next, this life can be amazing. I mean, here's the Andromeda Galaxy, 2 million light years away from us. Amazing to think there's potentially a trillion suns. I mean, just amazing, right? That's life. A dog and some flowers. I mean, how much is that? That's wonderful, isn't it? To be able to come home, share some time with another mammal on this planet. That's amazing. Love. Again, what can I say there? I mean, it's I'd hate to live in a world without love. But that's one of the things that makes life amazing, to be able to be bonded to another human being and be able to enjoy life. So life is amazing. We recognize that. Life will end. Life will end, right? We talked about that. It's just... it's the reality of the situation. And I love that. I thought it was very succinct, right? Got right to the point. Right to the point. Although I thought maybe I should just say CYL, for some people, see you later. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, how many have strolled through a cemetery? And I mean, just how that, just the brevity of life, it's almost overwhelming, isn't it? And as a secular humanist, you have to address death very honestly, and you have to kind of stare at it in its face and recognize it and just become almost friends with it in the sense that, you know what, as wonderful as life is, death is awaiting all of us. So what am I going to do to make my life as profitable, and so that hopefully future generations can enjoy a wonderful life as well? All right, so appreciate each moment as if it will be your last moment. How many of us are reminded of when we read an obituary or we go on Facebook and we see another person, a young person especially, that's passed away very suddenly? It kind of reminds you that this could be it, right? This could be the last day. And how many times have we heard that? And I think it was Steve Jobs that said, shortly before he died, at a Stanford address, became very popular. But he even said, people that believe in heaven don't want to die to get there, right? And that's very true. Even when I believed that when I died, I was going to go to a way better place, right, than this miserable existence that we all have down here. For some reason, I didn't want to just jump out in front of a bus, right? It's like, I still enjoyed going fishing, going squirrel hunting, and doing all these things that I enjoyed doing, right? I really had a passion for life. And that certainly didn't go away as a humanist, all right? And then fundamentally, it is on us to bring about a better life, okay? And this is one of the central and key points of being a secular humanist, is it's not up to anybody outside of this universe, whether call it a God or whatever you want to call it, that fundamentally, if we want to make the world a better place, it has to start with us as the individual, as the different societies. We've got to say, the burden is on us to figure it out. The burden is on us to say, okay, we're going to make these decisions. Let's look at the consequences. Let's continue to try to reduce suffering for as many people as possible. Let's try to do this. It's very, very complicated. Very complicated. But we are the only ones that can solve it. And we have solved a lot. And we can continue to hopefully solve it as we work together. But from our perspective, relying on a other undefined force to do that is probably not the most prudent course of action. All right? So that is the end of my presentation. I know we were going to do just a few short, typically probably for some of your other speakers, you'd have a prayer session. As you can imagine, humanists don't pray, all right? However, we do practice, not everybody, but it is very popular, the idea of mindfulness meditation. All right, some of you may be very familiar with that. It's become popularized probably in the last 10 years. It kind of stems from, Buddhism, kind of Eastern philosophy, but essentially it doesn't incorporate anything supernatural. It doesn't incorporate anything like that. It doesn't require you to believe something amazing is going on necessarily. But it is a way to calm your mind, learn how to control your thoughts, and learn how to not be just a slave to your passions, right? And that can be very valuable in thriving in this world, okay? So I want to just take, if you don't mind, 5 minutes, and I'm going to just walk you through just a very, very simple exercise that will kind of allow you, and this is something you can do in your daily life. You don't have to become a humanist. You don't have to believe there is no God or anything like that. This is just a very, very healthy meditative practice, all right? So what I'd like you to do is just everybody close your eyes. All right. What's that? And lay out your purse or wallet next. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think we're fine. Yep. All right. So the goal here is to try to get as quiet as possible. So that means I'm going to stop talking at some point. And what we want to try to do here is calm our minds, right? We have got all kinds of stories running in our heads. We've got to go to Walmart after this and pick up the new TV. We've got to get eggs. We've got to get, we've got all these worries. Am I going to be able to pay this bill? How are my kids doing? Constant thoughts that are racing through our heads that allow us to not live in the moment, right? Allows us not to live in that present and enjoy and appreciate that. So what I want you to do is just kind of recognize those thoughts that are going through your head, but I want you to first start paying attention to your body, right? Try to feel your hands. See if you can recognize them. Whatever sensation may be going through your hands or your arms or your back. Maybe you have a bad back and your back is hurting. Recognize that pain, right? Just kind of pay attention to it. Feel the pressure on your legs on the seat. Recognize that. So the idea here is to just be attuned to your body. What is happening now? All right? And just focus on nice breathing. Again, it's all just to kind of bring us down to a relaxed state. So now start paying attention to different sounds in the room. Maybe cars going by outside, the wind, a clicking of a clock. Now try to associate the physical things that you're feeling, your legs, your back, your arms.
maybe a headache you have, and the sounds. Try to associate those with the thoughts that you're having, right? As the sounds are entering your brain, so are these thoughts. No different. Recognize those thoughts. You'll see that they kind of just pop into your brain. You don't even know where they're coming from, right? But the more you become attuned to the thoughts, the more you see them as they appear. So the goal then is to try to take some of those thoughts. Maybe you have some negative thoughts. Maybe you think, I don't really like this guy. Take those thoughts and imagine just kind of capturing them and throwing them away from you. Right? So the goal here is to try to control your thoughts. Right? Because how many times a day do we have these negative emotions that are tied to thoughts that get us depressed, that get us unhappy, worry, so on and so forth? We can learn to recognize them, capture them for what they are, recognize that they're causing us anxiety, and then just simply cast them off. Ultimately, the goal is to not think about anything. You're clearing your mind of thoughts, worries. You want to get to that state of just not thinking. And that would be your point of meditation. Now you are just being. You're just existing in the moment. Do this for about 20 more seconds. We'll just end in silence. Let's all focus. All right, you can open your eyes, and you're back, right? And doing something like that once a day, once a week, can sometimes be very, very, very healthy for our bodies, physically, emotionally, psychologically. But again, thank you very much for giving me your attention. I enjoyed every minute. I hope you learned something today. And maybe you have a coworker or a friend that you find out is an atheist or Gnostic or secular humanist, whatever they identify as. I think you're going to hopefully have a better appreciation for where they're at. All right? Thank you very much.